A Sparrow's Tale. The Enchanted World of Banyan.
Let me introduce myself. We are House Sparrows, closely related to the lark family. Some of our close cousins from the lark family include the Ashley brown sparrow lark and the black crown sparrow lark. I do believe I'm flaunting my connections with the lark family, though it really is something to be proud of for us humble house sparrows. Don't be deluded by the name lark. Yes, those of the original larks are beautiful singers, like my second cousin, the skylark. They even had an ode penned to celebrate the beauty of their song by Percy Bysshe Shelley, the poet. We live scattered all over the length and breadth of the world. I, for one, live in the Indian subcontinent, specifically the south of India. I love the Indian summer heat, the cool monsoons, and breezy Junes. We are an eco-friendly lot and try our best to live in peace and friendship with other birds, insects, animals, and the human beings around us. We live in a flock beneath the shade of an expansive banyan tree that stretches its bountiful branches wide around the huge tree trunk. The tree is a haven with its perpetual shade, and the breeze from the thousands of its glossy leathery leaves fanning and rustling in the early morning air. I love the feel of its elliptically shaped velvety leaves and brush my feathers upon it. I love your dark, cool shade, banyan, I said to him one day, to which he replied amicably, "Do you now know why I spread my arms so wide, Sparrow, so I could embrace all you creatures?" At this, I snuggled close into one of his swaying slim aerial prop roots, as I have watched children snuggle into their mother's sorry palu for comfort and refuge. There were times, Sparrow, in the days gone by he seemed inclined to reminisce, when traders with their wares stopped to rest and make or finalize transactions here, at the sheltered base of my trunk. "Really," said I, swinging upon the aerial root, my soft feathers rustling in the breeze. The movement made other sparrows joined me, and we felt like flying trapeze performers as we swung faster and faster around Banyan's trunk. Did they come often, Banyan? Oh yes, Sparrow, almost every day, and at times many times in a day too. Yes, yes, swing away, you flouncing sparrows. You're cooling the air around me. Yes, they were called banyas or traders, and how some of them argued and quarreled. Oh, there was so much nose and activity about me. Anyway, thanks to the banyas, I have been called Banyan ever since, hailing from the fig family basically. I might have been called Figgy if it hadn't been for the banyas. Ha, ha, he laughed away. Quite overcome by his own humor. Figgy, Figgy, I chanted happily, enjoying the joke as much as the swing dot. At this point, he suddenly said, "I do have a fig name, Sparrow, but one which makes me a little ashamed." I was quite surprised at this declaration by my friend Banyan. I'm called Strangler Fig by some. Yes, I remember now. But I don't like being referred to by that name, Sparrow. Oh no, Banyan. Did you strangle someone? How terrible. But it's a treacherous name. Nothing sinister about it, Sparrow. I remember my seed was dropped into the crevice of a stately neem by a mena, after he had eaten his fill of a red, juicy banyan fruit. There I germinated and grew, and soon my roots growing downwards clawed into the neem's trunk and subdued my host. As a thriving youngster, my roots grew quickly until the neem now stays within my heart, and all you can see is me. Do you think I have done a terrible thing, Sparrow? He asked dolefully, all the elation of a while ago having vanished. For an instant I was at a loss for words. I almost stopped swinging and said softly, "Is he really in there?" I hopped close to the banyan's trunk and peered in. The neem smiled feebly at me through the thick, woody curtains of banyan. "He has given food and shelter for thousands of birds," said the neem, our silent listener, "and a multitude of insects nest in him. Tell him that. Tell him we are all a part of the ecological balance." I'm fine in here, though a bit sapped, but very happy to be a part of his benevolence. It feels good to live in his heart. Wow, said I, and loved the neem's docile spirit. The banyan seemed to shed dewy tears of maybe remorse or relief, and joy the hidden neem's tender words. I really couldn't tell. I thought to myself that I will set about taking a census of the residents of Banyan straight away, even as I flew to start my new assignment as a censor. A swarm of fig wasps whizzed past to feed upon Banyan's clusters of red figs. They half hummed and half buzzed a midsummer tune. I heard the chirping of the tiny white babblers who had made their nest among the dark leaves. They hopped from branch to branch as though they had a game going among themselves. I heard the black crows caw at the far end. They were the biggest of the birds residing in Banyan and commanded everyone fear and respect, stuttering with their black coats like advocates and lawyers from the courthouse at the far end of the village. I hopped from branch to branch, discovering the residents of the interiors of the beautiful lush banyan. My first stop was the nest of a white-cheeked barbet, where the mother barbet sat upon her eggs and simply said, "Hi," then dozed off again upon her warm eggs. Heart-spotted woodpecker, a duty-bound worker, went knock, knock, knocking upon a thick branch where he suspected a small band of termites had gnawed in. He had rid Banyan of a few such silent, deadly invaders lately, but his work was never done, he said to himself with a sigh. He nodded to me cordially and continued pecking. A few orange-headed thrushes flew in at the moment and settled upon the branches of the banyan, ruffling their yellow feathers after the long flight. The sunlight filtering through the leaves in soft strands lit their feathers to a beautiful fiery glow. They fluttered amidst the branches like orange-yellow flames of fire. They gobbled the caterpillars, weevils, and stray termites hungrily, and so the fig wasps, a little away, feeding on the red fruits, kept a wary eye on them. The raucous green parrots stopped their chattering and sat still in their clutches as I hopped by. They squawked their greeting and offered me dry berries and fruits that were their dinner. Their lemon-green feathers were a wild contrast to the darkened foliage of banyan. I had no idea Banyan had such an array of brightly colored residents. A white-bellied treepie who sat musing on a lower branch seemed very lonely. He was a beautiful, graceful bird, in startling white, black, and brown. His tail was a long flow of black and white, cascading elegantly behind him. He waited for the return of his mate. gone in search of food to a nearby forest, he bowed, then with a droop of his wings called to his mate. His nest was a platform of twigs made ready for egg-laying. He gave me a dreamy smile and seemed to be engrossed in the yellow-browed bulbul's soulful singing that drifted from a thickly covered branch of the banyan. Of the Passerini family, the bulbul's song enraptured all the residents of Banyan. I have often been lulled to sleep by his melancholic tunes. Quite a flock of us sparrows resided in Banyan. We had the most number of nests here, among the branches or in the holes and niches that dotted Banyan's thick woody trunk. Some of my cousins had moved to the eaves of houses nearby for want of privacy and space. For surely, in a tree that housed almost so many varieties of birds, not to mention the miners that were our frequent visitors, and the insects which constituted a partial part of Banyan's residence, we were hardly a quiet, secluded household. A swarm of lemon butterflies fluttered around the tree trunk. Like little shreds of sunshine, they flew in between the leafy boughs and rested upon the tender red leaves of banyan. Soon a small swarm of peacock pansy butterflies and a startling green-blue flew between the aerial roots, alighting upon them in colorful rows. "How exquisite you all look," said Banyan, always generous with his compliments, especially when well-deserved. The birds and insects paused to watch each time the gorgeous butterflies fluttered by, as though they were pretty ballet dancers in their shimmering brightly colored wings. Since Banyan stood by the banks of a river, there were lengthy patches of thick grass and reeds growing along the banks. Tiny flowers on weeds grew in profusion. The butterflies had their fill of nectar from these flowers. Sometimes they hovered over the pink water lilies in the river or rested delicately, as though on tiptoes, upon the flat round lotus leaves that floated on the green water. It really was a beautiful sight, as they admired their reflections on the fat dewdrops that roll like blobs of diamonds on the velvety leaves. Our days were thus spent with finding a mate, mating, nest building, breeding, and feeding, surviving in all the tranquility that swathed the banyan and its whereabouts. One day I dived down, as we all do, with partly closed wings and rose up in a glide. Our flights are undulated, accompanied by a long low whistle. At the tip of the rise, I voiced a sharp chip note. All the sparrows around me rose with me, and the air was aflutter. With hundreds of tiny sparrow wings, we all flew away in different directions. About 10 to 15 of us rested upon the taut telephone and electric wires that spanned the miles like fine black silk thread. We were like notes on a music sheet, sometimes in a continuous sequence, and at times accommodating uneven gaps of blue sky between us. Hurrying passers-by paused or stopped to watch us in sheer admiration. Children waved to us, and for the most part, we flew away in fear, though we knew no harm was meant. While we had sat gossiping upon the wires, a black-crowned sparrow lark that we had named Blackie gave us some news of his well-being. He had moved in with his mate, Tiku, to a house in the village to nest upon its rafters. The first few days, when Blackie and Tiku had flown into the house in search of a place to nest. Their chipping and flutter had caused grandmother and the mother of the house to call their daughter Mina and say excitedly, "Look, look, Mina. Those sparrows seem to be searching for a place to nest. Don't talk loudly, lest you frighten them off." Soon Blackie and Teku flew in with twigs, feathers, and strange little scraps to build their nest, and grandmother said happily, her joy overflowing her toothless smile, "They are nesting on the rafters. That's a good omen indeed." Blackie and Teku, hearing this, thought it was an auspicious beginning as well, and twittered. "That's good, how nice," said Mother, "but I hope they don't mess up the floor."